Hey, my name is Buran. Welcome to the video. Welcome to the stream. So, I wanted to actually talk about Veterans Day, and I wanted to talk about my experience, uh, my experience of what life was like, what it's like for me, and what's my backstory around sort of veterans and war is. And this might not be appropriate to everybody, but I've I felt like I wanted to share. Obviously, today is Veterans Day in the U.S., and it's a holiday that's celebrated mostly in the U.S. But war and war heroes have been acknowledged and have been mentioned and have been memorialized all throughout history. I'm sorry if I'm looking over here. I'm just getting my notes. And so when I was nine, I think 8 or 9, I remember waking up one day to and switching on the TV. We had the habit of, or I had the habit of just opening up the switching on the TV and watching a bit of cartoons. And I remember switching channels and going to one of the news channels, and I think it was CNN reporting on the Gulf War. Now this was early '90s, I think, 9 or 10 years old. I was back in South Africa and I was watching this war unfold in front of me. Like, I couldn't understand what, like, it took me a couple of minutes to figure out what was going on. On the screen, it was pitch black, and all of a sudden, there were these sparks of light. There was these, you could see there were rockets being launched from some sort of a vehicle. I don't know if it was a tank or whatever the case may be. You couldn't see the tank. There was just these flashes of rockets shooting into the air, and then moments later, it landing somewhere and some explosion happening. And I still remember to this day how vivid that picture was. How I just couldn't understand what this whole thing was about. Like, I couldn't understand what the war was about. I didn't understand why people were fighting it with each other. I couldn't understand what led people to that situation where they had to they got to an impasse, or they got to a disagreement, or they whatever the case may be. And so it it started me on this journey of actually looking into history and looking into, well, what is the thing about war that drives people. What is it about these conflicts that drive people into fighting with each other to such a massive scale, and where they would actually use weapons against each other? Because I in my world, in my little world that I had, it was just my parents, my brother, my friends at school, my teachers, my family, my uncles, my cousins, and our world was fairly safe, despite being in sort of political Africana territory in South Africa. We were pretty safe. My dad had a house at that point. He was doing well in his business. Things were good for the most part. Meanwhile, I learned from that news broadcast that other parts of the world were going through a different experience of life, and I couldn't quite understand that other parts of the world were having these conflicts, because my world was fine. My world was fairly good. And as I sort of started growing up and went into high school and started realizing that, well, history is formed by a lot of these conflicts, by a lot of these wars, or these, cold wars, or smaller wars, or just, protests, or things that happen in the street, sort of once off things, or just many different things happening. And we're going through that right now, in many different parts of the world. And at that point of my life, I realized that people are not necessarily fair, or were not necessarily fair to each other, because of different reasons, and I don't want to get into those reasons. And then a couple of years ago, I read Viktor Franklin's book, and I actually haven't finished reading it because I just got to a point in the book where his story about the Nazi concentration camps and being in that camp and just trying to survive was just so heavy on me that I couldn't finish the book. It was just too saddening. It was too hurtful. I just still, even up to a couple years ago, I just couldn't understand why people are the way they are. And when I think about that, it hurts me. And so my struggle with trying to understand it is still not finalized. It's still not, I still don't quite understand where racial tension comes from, or where political leadership and tension comes from, and why people are actually in such disharmony with one another, and why there's just so many disagreements. And I guess it comes from people being passionate about certain things, about their opinion, about where they stand on certain issues. And then there's also other people who are oppressing other, people who are oppressing, leaders who are oppressing, or taking freedoms away, or giving freedoms, or favoring one another, for favoring people in one way or the other. And my internal thing was, well, why would I force somebody to do something that they don't want to do? I mean, as a kid growing up in South Africa in an Indian household, you have to do stuff all the time for your parents. You're commanded all the time to take out the trash and do your homework and do all of these things. And those are necessary things, because they're our parents are just trying to do our best with us to try to give us that education, give us that experience, give us the tools, I guess, to survive in the world later on. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to sort of massive amounts of disagreement, like multiple people, that are fighting for their freedom, fighting for their rights, fighting for what they believe in, that's a whole nother level. And how do people actually convince other people to do atrocities in life? And obviously, Nazi Germany, where Viktor Franklin was held, is a prime example of how, even if the leadership is believing in something that may not necessarily be good for mankind, he managed to convince enough people that it was right for him. And so, you know, I talk about all of these things because I wonder sometimes, well, what role do I have in this life? What role can I play? And this was where I felt the struggle. It's like, well, I'm not rich, and I'm not I'm not brave enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not charismatic enough, I'm not, like, I had all these limiting beliefs of, like, what could I do to make an impact? What could I do to change the world? And then I started seeing, Superman on TV, and I started seeing things like people like Steve Jobs, who have created amazing products and changed lots of areas of our lives, and people like Bill Gates, who founded Microsoft, made a bunch of money, and is now working philanthropically for the most part, and trying to give back to humanity to try to solve some of these problems. He's vocal about his opinions. And, I look at other people like Gary Vee, where he's just doing his thing. He's just trying to convey his message. He's just trying to educate people on how they can see, how they can get through their day, to work and fight for the things that they believe in. And so, I realized through all of this research, and through all of the noticing, and through all of the stuff going on in the world that I was exposed to, or that I had read about, or that I saw videos about, and I realized that, well, all I have is the world that I have around me. All that's important to me, or not, that's the wrong way to say it. All that I can do right now is control, or manage, or take care of my surrounding environment. And so what I did then was I moved from South Africa to Thailand, so that I could create a stable base, so that I could create a foundation for who I am. And that foundation lies in me just acting with integrity, and being a good person, and trying to show up for my clients, and trying to show up for my kids, and being available to them. And even though it's taxing on my body and taxing on my mind, in terms of like working late and trying to deliver services to the United States 12 hours away from me, working nights and answering emails at 5 in the morning, and taking calls at odd times of the day, it's all necessary because I've made a promise to my clients. I've made a promise to myself that I was going to live within my integrity. And if I promised to do something to somebody, for somebody, that I would. And so in my little world, even though I'm not at war, and even though I'm fighting for my own freedoms still, and I'm fighting for my own liberation and my own wealth and my own salvation, I the only thing I can do is control and manage and do what I can do in my world. And the vision is that vision that I have, or that level of integrity, that ability to show up, will translate into my kids' lives by osmosis. Hopefully, be a beacon, or be somebody who they can look up to, who they can say, "Hey, my dad did this, that, and the other," or when this situation came up, my dad acted in this sort of way. Is very important to me. It's one of the foundations of my life. It's one of the foundations of just the way that I've been brought up. But I guess also because of all these war stories and all the stuff that I've seen going on in the world, it's kind of, well, there are enough people angry and fighting in the world. Not to say that I wouldn't participate if I had the opportunity, but in my own household, in my own space, in my own surroundings, in my own culture, my own group of friends, I am a certain way because I've chosen to be that way, to be calm, to be pleasant, to be kind. Because there's enough people just not doing it, not showing up, not being inspirational, not leading. And so all I can do, the thing that I've really, I guess, accomplished, is realizing that I am in control, or I have the ability to manage my own space, to manage my own integrity, to manage my own anger, to work on myself so that I can allow myself to show up, to give myself courage to do Facebook Lives, to actually talk to the camera. Because these days, today, the internet is our voice. It is our microphone. It is our megaphone to be able to say what we want to say and to be open about certain things. And so as I go through sort of acknowledging the veterans in the US, but also war heroes around the world, it's important to realize and remember that these people that have gone to war, that have taken their risks, and one of the prime examples, obviously, in my life, being South African, is Nelson Mandela. Like, what he did for the South African people, irrespective of color, was a brave thing, and it helped me form my life. It helped my parents. It helped our friends. It helped the country as a whole to stand, to unite, and to be further along than where they were. It was a change and an opportunity that the country needed. I'm not debating, and I'm not talking about what's going on right now in the country. I'm talking about how these people in our lives have impacted various aspects of our life. And a lot of the technology, a lot of the facilities, a lot of the conveniences, a lot of the luxuries we have is because of those people. And so I want to recognize those efforts because it's important and it's necessary. So with that being said, I know this was a bit of a heavy video. Thank you so much for watching. And if you liked the video, like it, hit the little like button. And if you want to follow along, if you want to subscribe wherever you're watching this, hit the buttons that are appropriate, follow or subscribe. And hopefully I'll see you on the next video. Thank you so much. Take care for now. Bye. Happy Veterans Day.